welcome to today's webinar, Building Youth Engagement and Involvement, Technical Assistance. My name is Ann Kuppinger and I'm with CTAC, and I'm very fortunate today to be joined by three members of the Youth Power team. Azaria Georgia, who's the Youth Peer Services Training and Credentialing Coordinator, Bianca Logan, who's the Youth Peer Development and Training Manager, and Alex Frasina, who's the Long Island Regional Youth Partner. So we have some great resources, folks who have a lot of experience to talk to you today about the kinds of help Youth Power can provide you with to support your efforts to engage youth and involve them in the work that you're doing. Next slide. So just a couple of instructions around how to use the WebEx system. We've added you all in listen-only mode because we have quite a few participants on today's webinar, but we really want to hear your questions, so we encourage you to chat them into us throughout the webinar, and then at the end of the webinar, we'll have an opportunity to go through those questions. If you don't see a chat box on the right-hand side of your screen, if you hover over the bottom of your screen, you'll see a speech bubble. If you click on that, it'll open up the chat box. And within that chat box, you have a drop-down menu, and you can select host, and you can chat to Connor, who is our host today. And those questions will be collected for us to answer at the end of the webinar. Also at the end of the webinar, you're going to see a survey, and we ask you to just stay on for another 30 seconds and respond to those survey questions. Letting us know how helpful today's webinar was, and also giving us ideas about future topics that you'd like us to include. The slides and the recording for this webinar will be posted on the CTAC website within a few days, and you can find that by looking under the upcoming events tab, and there'll be a calendar there. You can navigate to today's date, and you'll find those recordings and the recording and slides. Next slide. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to our Youth Power team.
Hi, thanks. It's Azaria. Thanks, Ann. Good morning, everybody. I want to thank you for joining us today. Please excuse me if I sound a little off. I'm not really feeling that well today. So today we'd like to share with you Youth Powers and Families Together's technical assistance. Next slide. Our agenda for today, we will be reviewing who we are as our Youth Peer Advocate team at Families Together, some of our results, our process, and how you can get connected to us. Next slide. I'm going to start off with sharing with you Youth Power's mission statement. Youth Power is the Families Together statewide youth network, and we're run for and by youth and young adults. We are the statewide network of young people who have been labeled and are seeking change. Together, we have decided to speak up about our experiences because nobody knows what it is like for us better than we do. Through peer-to-peer mentoring, we empower young people to be active citizens who are aware of government operations, their rights, and the ability to influence policies, practices, regulations, and laws. We are young people helping other people, ensuring the availability of self-help and peer support so that young people get the support they need with the respect and dignity that they deserve. You can move to the next slide for me. So here I'd like to talk about why you should choose us to support you with technical assistance. So at Youth Power, we are the leading peer-run youth advocacy network in New York State. We have young adult peer staff in all 5 of our regions of New York State, including a number of statewide staff dedicated to specific projects who are knowledgeable on current youth culture and that are also able to speak and address the uniqueness of the youth and young adult populations. Our staff have personal experience in advocacy and across diverse systems. They are also able to support development of practices where traditional engagement and partnership strategies may not work. Our agency and staff have connections with a network of partners such as Youth Move National, CTAC, the System of Care Communities, SAMHSA, and other agencies and organizations who prioritize youth engagement and involvement. We provide learning opportunities for youth, adults, youth peer advocates, and agencies to support advocacy, engagement, and professional development. We as an agency are also working to address the needs of communities, agencies, and state partners. For instance, we are currently working to address the needs of transition-age youth with state and regional partners. We also meet individuals and agencies where they are at to learn about what is going well and where improvements are needed. We often collaborate to produce an individualized technical assistance plan to move forward with improving youth involvement together. So we will address in more detail what this process can look like as we move forward with this presentation. At this time, I'd like to pass the mic over to Alex Rosina, our Western Regional, Alex, our Long Island Regional Youth Partner.
Great, thank you, Azaria. So technical assistance can be done by many different people within our organization. And when it comes to youth, many of that fall to the Youth Power Program within Families Together in New York State. And a lot of that work comes to regional youth partners, which is myself and the 4 others pictured on this slide, if you're looking at that. The regional youth partners, or RYPs, you may hear us say, are in each region as dictated by the Office of Mental Health's breakup of the New York State map. In this role, we're tasked with many objectives. We support agencies through technical assistance to become more youth-guided and better engage young people. We support the growth of the youth peer workforce, along with the implementation and sustainability of that workforce. We sit on many local, regional, and statewide committees to ensure youth voice is taken into account. And we support young people in their advocacy within their program, community, region, and also statewide. Where all the RYPs are young people with different system experiences, many of which who also have experience working as youth peer advocates. So they bring their passion and their knowledge and their experiences to the table everywhere they go. We're all very passionate about the need for youth voice to not only be heard, but for it to matter when it is heard. We all have our strengths. And through my time here, I've been here for a little bit above 5 years. It's really become to help organizations better engage young people and to make sure that they think outside the box and really let the people that they're serving dictate what the program looks like. And as we go through this, we're going to talk about different types of technical assistance and the process for getting technical assistance and carrying it out. And I think, especially for me, this is important to talk about because in my time here, technical assistance, there's been a lot of times where we were offering it and I didn't even kind of realize I was offering technical assistance. So we really need to step back and make sure we're following this process that we lay out, because it helps make sure the RYPs and myself, we're sticking to our word and kind of keeping track of what we've done and what we need to do, because it's been very informal up to now, and it led to some detaches in work being done when we really could have, if we had a solid plan, we could have followed through better. And some of the TA that I've offered in my time, it ranges from helping organizations with interview questions for youth peer advocate roles, reviewing flyers and materials to make sure it's youth guided and youth friendly. I've even sat in on interviews for youth peer advocates and offered workshops and help kicking off youth advisory councils. And that's one that we see a lot, is help to guide a youth advisory council to not only get structured, but also be sustained. And I think it's really important to think of, there's a lot that the RYPs can do, and we all have our different strengths, and we all really support each other. So if there's something in a different region that interests you, there is the capability for us to communicate and really support that need. And we're just trying to make sure that we're formalizing the process a little more so that we can better help organizations and better create that partnership moving forward. Next slide, please. So our strategic goal is to improve the quality of youth peer advocacy and involvement by offering technical assistance and training opportunities to young people and adult allies. So something we need to think about is youth culture is ever evolving. And sometimes it seems like we treat young people today the same as we treated young people years ago, but there's so many different obstacles and issues faced and also different solutions available. And so our goal is to make sure we're supporting self-advocacy, increasing youth-guided practice for young people today, not just an age that we think this is what they should be doing, and also implementing youth peer services, which when I came to Youth Power, I didn't know. I'm one of the few people in this role that wasn't a youth peer advocate prior, and I didn't really know about this, and all I could think of when I was coming into this role is I wish I had a peer to speak with and be around and to really guide me when I was at my worst, because I knew that some of the methods that I used at that age were not helpful, and having someone that had been there before would have really helped me and made me feel a little more heard and not alone, and it also would have empowered me to be more involved in everything I was doing. So I think that's a really important service and a really important thing that we need to be building up and really supporting the appropriate way. So I think that what we bring to the table is making sure organizations and parents are understanding youth perspective and youth culture, because it is so different today. And I also think when we hit a certain age, and I find myself doing this, we kind of forget what we were like when we were younger. Sometimes we tend to overreact to age-appropriate things, and I always say age-appropriate because it doesn't mean they're appropriate actions, but they're appropriate for the age range. And especially with young people in the system, we tend to overreact to them doing something maybe someone else is doing outside the system. And yes, it may be something that's not good or healthy, but we need to be taking everything into account with their age, the people that are around, the culture of youth and young adults, to make sure that we're not overreacting and stifling growth by shutting things down before we give people a chance to understand why it's inappropriate and how we can really support them in learning to not do it again for a reason, not just saying no. And as RYPs, we're here to help highlight the different perspectives and support organizations and parents in finding a balance and building support and meaningful engagement for young people. And in doing that, we're here to support not only peer workers, but supervisors of the peer workforce, because we understand that a youth peer advocate could be the best youth peer advocate, but if they don't have the correct support and the correct voice within their organization and the correct guidance, it's all going to be very difficult. So we want to support supervisors along with youth peer advocates, because that's the only way it's really going to be a successful workforce. And we want to help young people's voice be heard. So that includes starting youth advisory councils. That includes sitting on committees and bringing up feedback we hear in focus groups and feedback we hear across the state to the table at every committee we're on. And that ranges from MCO advisory boards to state committees on education, and then also local committees around youth events and different symposiums and conferences. We want to make sure that youth voice is heard and valued at those tables. So sometimes we represent young people, or we connect young people to those opportunities to really be heard and see the change that they're affecting. Next slide, please. So our strategic goals in action, it looks very different. Again, I can only speak specifically for my region. Things look very different because even though traffic can be terrible on Long Island, any organization is kind of within a day's drive for me. So it's kind of different than Western New York, where that could be an overnight trip. So the engagement may look different. It may be virtual more than in person, whereas for me, it may be in person. But our goal in action, it's really we create an individualized support plan, and sometimes it may not be necessary if it's kind of short term and it's just like reviewing a slide or reviewing a handout that you're giving out to make sure it's youth friendly. But we like to create a full TA plan through discussion and really assessing the organization needs. We can do virtual or in-person consultations, like I mentioned, and then we offer different trainings and supports for adult partners and youth. And adult partners could be staff, it could be parents that are attending your organization. It could look very different depending on the need that is really addressed or that's brought up through our assessment. So we support the development of skills, processes, and structures to foster progress and sustainability. So what that looks like is training and workshops for youth and young adults, and then we have follow-up evaluations and consistent contact to make sure that feedback heard is being really taken into account and put into action, and that we're supporting the growth. We're not just going to come in, do something, and then leave you on your own. We're going to be there to support the growth and make sure if you take a step back, we can help you regain traction and really keep moving forward. And then we also have regional and statewide learning collaboratives, such as the Youth Peer Advocate Leaders Meeting, which is a meeting within each region that is for the supervisors of youth peer advocates. And this is a really important meeting for supervisors to be at because it lets you not only know that like maybe some of the struggles you're facing in finding youth peer advocates or supporting is shared between other organizations locally, and also because we need a place where we can all meet and share what's working, what you're doing well, and maybe other organizations can learn from that and kind of implement it as they grow, because we want to learn the good and the bad. And I think there's a lot of good, and we forget it because we're so focused on some of the struggles we're having. So we want to bring in all the supervisors to discuss those. And then we also have a similar meeting for the YPAs called Pleased, which is Peer Leadership Support and Development. And this is a place for all of the youth peer advocates to come and speak freely about maybe issues they're facing. It doesn't become a vent session. We're not out there talking bad about organizations. It's really a supportive environment where we bring in different trainings and teach people skills that they need for the job, and then also maybe help them with difficult discussions that they could have with a supervisor, whether that be explaining why a case that they're working on is difficult and they're kind of scared to have that conversation. We kind of support that and make sure that they feel comfortable in everything they're doing, because that's the way they can best help anyone they work with. We also help identify small problems and items that have been overlooked before they become an issue. So we provide assessments and focus groups, and I've seen a lot of great things done through focus groups. Last year was the first year we really started to focus on just doing focus groups. And I've gone into organizations, hosted focus groups, and seen changes happen within a week. And imagine being any person, not even just a young person, you give someone feedback, and within a week something's changed. That's a very powerful thing to see your words in action. And I've seen a lot of engagement built from just hosting focus groups and really taking into account what young people are saying. And when we do those focus groups, we create a thorough report of feedback from what we heard in that focus group for you to see what the young people said, how it was said, and we also give information on what we think could help to solve that issue or solve the problem that they're seeing or make a change within the organizational structure. We also facilitate key discussions about agency culture and the impact of youth involvement. So that could be meeting with staff to explain youth engagement and youth culture and why it's important to let young people voice their opinion and be involved, or have a youth advisory council. And then we also help to support the development of long-term goals and strategies. So that's really individualized technical assistance plans. So that's kind of laying out who the key partners are, what we all need to do to accomplish these goals, and then creating a plan for follow through and follow up to make sure we're doing it, and then also creating a plan for us to really look at how we're doing it. So not just that it's getting done, but is it being done well? So that could be evaluations or different ways to kind of take in all the information to show how we're accomplishing these goals. And our ultimate goal, and like I said, it looks different in every region. It looks different in every case, even if someone's asking for the same quote-unquote technical assistance, it can look very different depending on the agency and who the partners are. But the ultimate goal is to support the sustainability and empower others to have the knowledge and skills to advance youth-guided practice on their own, and to create a culture where young people are heard and valued. I think we have different, and I'll kind of go into this at a later point, but there's short-term TA, long-term TA, and I'll give you more concrete examples of that in a second. But for now, I will pass the mic over to Bianca Logan.
Okay, so we're going to go over the basics of the process of technical assistance with us. It starts with really the initial request, and you can put in a request through our website or by reaching out to an RYP in your region, or even if you're at an event and it's outside of your region, say you were in Albany for an event and there was somebody tabling, you can reach out to them and they will follow up and direct you to the right person as far as getting technical assistance in your area. We also have forms online, a way to submit it electronically. And then the next step is assessment. We do an initial assessment through the TA request form that we provide you when you request TA. And that's just really basics to get a feel about what's going on, how things are going as far as youth-guided practice goes. It can be filled out as a form, or we can have a conversation that allows us to kind of fill it out based on what we've talked about. And we can also do it together. We're super flexible as far as that initial assessment, but it'll all go into a technical assistance request form for us. And then from there, we start the plan development. As Alex talked about, we're really trying to formalize some of that plan development so that we have the documentation and the accountability to make sure that we're all doing our part. Because when it comes to making youth-guided practice better, it takes a partnership. And we're really excited to kind of have steps for that now. So during the planning process, the RYP reviews the information that has come through the request and initial conversations, and works with the person that individually requested the technical assistance to come up with this plan that will address the needs, and it includes sustainability planning. So this is often a discussion process, and we'll talk a little bit more about what the plan looks like as we go forward in this presentation. Then we have implementation. It's all about putting it into action, because we don't just want to plan, we want to make it work for everybody. And that is a really exciting process. And as Alex gave some examples that have been successful for him, and sometimes it happens super fast. Sometimes it takes a little bit, but we're here as a partnership with you guys that are requesting the technical assistance to make it happen for you. The last step is evaluate. We have a feedback process for technical assistance, and we have evaluation forms. Depending on the technical assistance that's requested, if it's short-term and long-term, the evaluation process looks a little bit different. But this is after the plan has been completed, and for the technical assistance, and the RYP will follow up like a few months later to check in throughout the process based on the needs that are kind of designated in the plan. And this process really allows us to document the effectiveness of the support that we're providing and guides the work that is done statewide to support partners. So some of the things that we have in place as far as Pleased and YPAL goes, that is come from technical assistance requests and interacting with our partners to see what's really needed. And the beauty of doing this work is we meet people where they're at, and that means that sometimes when there's a request in multiple areas, we're going to really take a step back and think about how it's working to make it better for everybody. Next slide, please. So this is an example of the form. So at the bottom, you'll find that on our website, which is undergoing a little bit of changes, so it might look a little different, but there will be a technical assistance area. You'll find the form to request assistance. We ask you to fill out this information, obviously so we can have contact information, but just so we get bare basics. And then from there, we will have the regional youth partner contact you. So we just wanted to show you this so you're a little familiar, know what to expect when you're making a request, and then the regional youth partner will be reaching out to you soon after. Next slide. All right, so this is the exciting part. We get to come in and have a conversation. It's often informal at first, and sometimes, you know, we have those conversations and then we figure out that a technical assistance request comes from that. And it's all about the engagement we have within our regions and with our partners. But then it comes with the intention of being more formalized. So we either ask you to fill out a technical assistance form, or like I said before, we'll fill it out together via conversation. The initial assessment consists of general questions and a short assessment as far as youth guided practice goes. That helps us develop an understanding of youth involvement at your agency or program. It also helps us get an understanding of your readiness for the level of youth involvement and readiness for youth peer advocates. Or it can be a support to evaluate the readiness of the youth peer advocate program you have in place already. We come in to just support on specific things, such as having a focus group or a presentation with a specific technical assistance concern. So as like I described earlier, it can range from short-term technical assistance to long-term technical assistance. Some of the questions we ask will be around how engaged young people are at your agency, how they're viewed at the agency, and the agency's understanding of the youth peer advocate role or youth guided practice within the organization, and what efforts have been made so far to integrate young people or youth peer advocates into the team. Excuse me. As we go forward in this presentation, we're going to review a little bit more in depth about the technical assistance. And if you ever have any questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to us. And this support is more structured and provided as a commitment over a long period of time. So as we go forward and develop a relationship, it doesn't mean it has to be just one presentation. It can be a multitude of components that come together to support you with getting where you want to be. Next slide. So as I referenced, the more in-depth technical assistance is developed between the RYP and the person that requests it. Sometimes it's not an individual person that requests it, but maybe a team of people that are working to set up these goals, action steps in order to implement like the desired outcome between the RYP and the agency. And ultimately, when we have these steps and responsibilities that are shared, we can develop these timelines that are effective, track the outcomes, and make sure that that responsibility is mutual and that it's a relationship that we are able to do together, and also foster sustainability through that relationship and action steps. Next slide. So as I talked about the shared responsibility and kind of action items and being able to work together to sustain the technical assistance, any key players that need to be a part of it, are a part of the team as far as fulfilling the technical assistance plan. Oftentimes, the request for technical assistance comes from that champion staff at an agency that really gets and understands youth involvement. And a lot of times that's the person that's charged with the task of increasing the youth involvement because they just get it. And that's actually a blessing to us to be able to have that person and that relationship to further the youth involvement with integrity at an agency. For TA to work, all parties that need to be a part of decision making must be involved. If young people's input is going to a governance board or an organizational leader, those people need to be engaged in the process as well. Strategies and materials will be developed and evaluated jointly by whoever's providing the technical assistance, such as an RYP, and the organization. They will be created with the organization and not for it. We're not about creating things for other people. We're about allowing them to join us in the process of creating it so it works best for them. So it's a mutual process where everybody has involvement in making sure it's something that's going to be sustainable, because ultimately that is our end goal. Ultimately, all parties share responsibility to assess one another's performance and a commitment to follow through on assignments. And ultimately, keeping the lines of communication open and respecting boundaries of time and capacity are really important. We want to be real and transparent in the process of providing technical assistance and understand that things change sometimes during the process when we're providing long-term technical assistance. But ultimately, it's really tailored specifically to what the needs are, and we're going to make sure that we're inviting all key players to make sure it's successful long-term. And I am going to pass it over to Azaria.
Awesome, thank you, Bianca. So now I'm going to talk about the implementation phase. So the implementation phase always obviously begins implementing some of these action steps that we've discussed. These are some of the areas that we have supported agencies with. We are able to provide needed training to youth and adult partners. Some of those trainings are around youth-guided practices, or supporting young people to develop some of those leadership skills, or address some barriers in the agency. We also provide assistance in creating we have provided assistance in creating social marketing plans and materials around to either engage young people, to market to youth peer advocates, or to just help make materials more youth-guided or youth-friendly. Another area is assisting with the Youth Peer Advocate program and its implementation. So here we've had youth peer advocates RYPs support either like looking at policies and practices within the organization. Our RYPs have supported agencies with hiring and onboarding of youth peer advocates, sitting in with interviews to support that, and some other areas. So in the implementation phase also, we continue to look back at the plans we created and whether or not the correct plan of action to be taken. We may need to tweak the plan moving forward to accommodate changes or meet unaddressed needs. The plan should also include regular evaluation so that the strategy can change to meet new needs or to deal more effectively with ongoing issues. Our relationships that we have through our existing partnerships and those we support with technical assistance has really helped us to develop the youth peer support and training services that youth peer advocates are providing, and then also provide that training for youth peer advocates with integrity. We've been able to successfully support and collaborate with agencies and integrate the voices of youth peer advocates into this training. Next slide, please. So in the evaluation phase, we like to follow up with agencies. Often this includes tracking our progress with agencies. One area, like for focus groups, for example, we provide detailed feedback to the agency that can be used to address needs or begin the process of engaging with young people. These forms are also a requirement for our reporting, and they help to evaluate ours and the agency's progress moving forward. Some of our follow-up also includes verbal check-ins just following the TA sessions. We may ask you to do like a web-based survey, or just we may interview you for various on various topics. I'd like to pass it back to Alex.
Great, thank you, Azaria. So now we get to the bulk of explaining kind of the TA we've done, or the most common TA requests. So a lot of times we have organizations contact us to kind of address their readiness for youth peer support. So basically, through conversation, through them filling out assessments, we can identify maybe some procedures or issues or things that need to be worked on as a collective to be more ready to accept youth peer support. And I know that it's kind of hard to, you wouldn't want outside sources dictating your readiness, and that's not what we're here to do. We're not here to say, like, you can't do this. We're here to just make sure you're setting up a system that will help young people thrive and be the best they can be as a youth peer advocate. So it's really about kind of the supervision structure, the hiring and onboarding structure, even the interviewing structure to make sure you're getting the most qualified people in. So it's not, we're not going to come in and be like, oh no, you can't do this. It's more about making sure you're setting yourself up in the best situation to offer youth peer support and sustain youth peer support, because we see a lot of turnover in peer roles in general, not just youth peer roles. And we want to make sure you're getting people in and helping to grow them into their next phase of career and supporting them while they're with you in that role. We also create youth peer support programs or the hiring and, like I said, hiring and orientation of youth peer advocates. So that's kind of going over boundaries. And a lot of it is a reminder that it's the same as hiring a lot of other staff. You have to go through what your organization does and kind of set up the safety protocols and all of that information, but then also kind of understanding how you're going to support a young person in this peer role, because a peer role is different than other roles. So how we can help you support them. And again, that could be short-term TA as far as looking at interview questions, looking at how you're promoting job openings, or it could be more long-term of how you're sustaining this role and what your organizational structure around the youth peer advocates look like. A really, really big one that we get often, and I've seen a lot even more recently, is starting and sustaining a youth advocacy council or board. And this is a great way for organizations to get feedback from dedicated young people about their processes or the services that are being offered. But I think it's important to think about what you're starting a youth advisory council for. A lot of times we kind of get interest in the youth advisory council, but they just want young people to meet. We really advise that you have a plan and a reason for having these people meet and give feedback. And you're also creating a plan of what it's going to look like when they give feedback. So that's what we come into structure. We also try to set a boundary in the beginning normally. And I feel like we've had the most trouble with boundaries around youth advisory councils. It's the idea that we are there to help start it and we help sustain it, but we cannot be the sole person running youth advisory council. So when we come in, we are not then the lead of your youth advisory council. We would be someone supporting the lead. And this is like a long-term TA where we can be at the first 4 meetings to make sure we're supporting. And again, this could look different in regions based on location and travel that would be needed. But we can be there to support the meetings and then kind of phase out where maybe we're checking in every 2 months and then keep phasing out and making sure we're supporting people to do their best, but not that we have to be physically in the building for that to run, which is where the sustainability of that comes in. Another big TA request coming from state partners along with local partners is addressing the needs of transition age youth. So that's young people that may be aging out of the child serving system and into the adult system. And we've seen an influx of young people entering Prose programs. So we've done things like go to a Prose program and do focus groups with just young adults that are in that program to address maybe why they are less engaged in it, and to kind of build up what they would like to see in that program. We've also gone and hosted events, and again, it's a little different when you're working with a Prose program as far as there's no age restriction. So like you can't say this event is only for people this age. So you have other people come in, but it's kind of aiming things more at youth culture. So that's workshops around self-advocacy, workshops around harnessing hip-hop, which is something I do on Long Island, and different tie-ins to youth culture to kind of build in that engagement and build in more sustainability of having young people in Prose programs. So when we look at the differences, there's, like I said, short-term TA, which could just be a phone call asking a question around, is your material youth guided, or a short question about the hiring process, and we kind of talk through that, and it doesn't really go beyond that. So that could be, it could be a one-time conversation, and that's short-term TA. And I think sometimes I have a hard time wrapping my head around that. I think of like, oh, I just had a conversation with someone. But like, no, it's technical assistance, and we're trying to formalize that so that we can set something up where, say you ask me a question about the hiring process or the onboarding process, it would be beneficial for both of us if I follow up on that to make sure it helped, or if there was something that organizationally worked better for you so that I could share that with other people who have similar questions. So this formalization is really just to offer a better support to people and also share the good feedback we get on things organizations are doing to help create a better system. And then another big thing that we do very often within all the regions is we get called to offer presentations or workshops, and that could be for staff and parents, or that could be for youth. And some of like the big ones we hear are self-advocacy and kind of how to utilize your voice. Another big one for me is harnessing hip hop, which is about creativity and using your creativity as a coping skill and a way to connect to natural supports. But in other regions, it's more, it's similar, but it's around like creative advocacy or artivism and different ways that you can use your voice and use your creativity as your voice. And then for staff, we get a lot of requests for presentations on youth culture and youth engagement, so how they can better support young people to have a voice and how they can really get young people to even want to take part in their programs and their activities. Because so many organizations have great programs and great activities, and they're just lacking on like getting people in the door to them. And we want to support people in being their full selves and using everything that they have to offer. And there's so many people that have great programs, and we just want to support them in figuring out how to really get people engaged in them. And then for parents, we get a lot of requests, and I do a lot of this because I co-facilitate a support group, and I'm very tied in with Agape, which is a part of the foster care, a foster parent and adoptive parent coalition. And we get a lot of requests for youth perspective. And in those type of workshops, we utilize feedback we hear from young people across the state, as well as kind of our experience as young people going through systems, to show like maybe what you see of why someone is acting a way is kind of different than what I would say is why they're acting that way. And it really comes from a trauma-informed, strength-based lens of, well, maybe this is, and we don't want to interject about why we think people are doing things, because, again, everyone's an individual. So I can't speak for why someone else is doing something, but it's kind of that youth perspective of opening people's eyes to there are other reasons things happen, and kind of just to take that into account and make sure we're coming from a trauma-informed place and a place that understands strengths and isn't focusing on weaknesses and being detrimental to growth and changes of behavior. So that's kind of like the big common TA request, but there really is, everything comes from a conversation. It really starts from just reaching out to, whether it be the TA request form or reaching out directly to an RYP. That's really where the conversation starts, and there's so much that we are capable of as experts of our story and experts of trauma-informed care and being strength-based, that anything can be created, whether it be a workshop, presentation. It all comes through that conversation and building of relationships with organizations. And like I said, it starts with a phone call or email, and the formal stuff can come down the road, but it's really about just connecting with us and making sure you have an understanding of our background and know that we're very passionate about what we do, and we bring a lot of expertise and skills to the table. But that can only be found out through conversation. So it's really about starting the conversation, asking questions, because, again, maybe there's something we didn't cover today, but you're interested in. And odds are, if we can't personally do it, someone on our team can. And if they can't, we have connections to statewide, national partners that have a lot of information. So there's someone we can reach out to get information for you. So just make sure you make that call, send that email, and then we can move from there and support your organization with any needs they have. Next slide, please. So as you'll see on the slide, it has the number you can call. It has our website and an email that you could send any questions you have to. And then on our website, you can also find the contact information for all the RYPs. So make sure to, if you want to directly contact them instead of sending it to the info, but that email will get the information to them also. Is there another slide, I believe?
So this is me, Alex. Hello, everyone.
Great.
This is Ann again. There's just a couple of reminders about some upcoming events, CTAC events. And then the next slide is our CTAC contact information, so you can also reach out to us if you have any questions. What I want to turn to now are some of the questions that have come in through the chat. And gosh, you guys just did a great job, I think, helping people expand their thinking around the kinds of ways that Youth Power can support them, not only around the implementation of youth peer support and the hiring of youth advocates, but just youth involvement in general. Which relates to our first question, which is, do you have any advice for youth who want to form a peer advocacy group within their agency? So the initiative here is coming from the young people themselves.
Yeah, this is Alex. That's a great question. I think that would come through a conversation, because we'd have to understand like what type of organization it is and how we can really support it. But that is definitely something an RYP can help get off the ground, and it's part of kind of the grassroots advocacy we're trying to do, of trying to empower young people to start these peer groups or to start councils and to make change themselves, because they have the power to. So we would support that in the best way we can. And I think that could come from conversations with the organization, as well as supporting the young people in how they set the foundation for the peer group. So that's definitely something to reach out for. And I kind of, like I said, we can get the same request multiple times and it looks different how it's carried out. So that would come through conversation, but that's definitely something we can support.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead,
Just to,
Bianca. Yeah.
just to add to that, some examples of things we might do in that situation, like Alex said, it's all tailored based on like the unique. We're going to come in and have an understanding of what the organization is like and kind of what the dynamics of the youth engagement is before we're just going to like be like, all right, let's do this. Just so we're doing it effectively, and how it best fits within the organization. Some examples of some things we would do, and after a conversation to see if this is appropriate, but some things I know I've done in the past is we have a presentation called the How-Tos of Youth Guided Practice, which there's actually a booklet that's available as a resource on our website called the How-Tos of Youth Guided Practice. It has a lot of tools in there around starting a youth advisory council, and just general youth guided practice information. So we have a training that is a like super short version of that we often give to staff members or adult allies at an agency. And it's open, we want multiple people to attend. We can come in and do that on a staff, like a day where there's a mandatory staff meeting. And that allows us to kind of like present youth guided practice to the organization, and then it opens the doors for conversations around starting that youth group or youth advisory council, so that the organization has a baseline understanding and the key players that would be involved. And then we can also support young people in how to communicate what they're actually wanting, as far as this goes, and how to some of the processes they might need to follow and prepare them about, like, they might have to write a proposal and submit it to like the director, and that's all stuff we would do working directly with the young people and with our partners at the agencies. So that's just a little bit more of some possible steps.
That's great. We have kind of a related question, which is when you start these councils, are the members, let's say you have an organization and either the young people or the staff initiate a conversation around this, are the members of the council currently receiving services from the agency, or are they youth who formerly received services, or youth from the community? How does that usually look?
It varies. It depends on what the organization is looking for. In a case where it may be past folks that have been engaged in the program, it could be that those people are there to act in a mentoring role, which is sometimes really beneficial to have that peer support for the folks that are currently there, and that hope, right, that sign that they, things can get better and you can be functional, you can come back and give back. So it really varies. A lot of times we run into some privacy issues with those, with that setup, but some organizations want that. So it really, really depends. It's all individualized. I can't say one way or another because it's going to look different for everybody. But we'll sit down, we'll have a conversation about it, and we'll figure out what works best for you.
Great. I mean, I'm really getting the sense from all of this how individualized your work is and sort of making it a collaborative, really strength-focused process for everybody that's involved, which I think is just great. Here's another question. Our agency wants to hire youth peer advocates, but everyone feels like this is a big step. What kind of support can you provide to help us think through how we can do this right? And can you help us even if we haven't hired a youth peer advocate yet?
That is a great question. I know for myself, a lot of the starting conversation, and again, some of this goes to like an assessment and understanding the organizational structure, but a lot of the first step is like coming in and offering a presentation and conversation around what the real role of a youth peer advocate is, and like the benefits of having a youth peer advocate on staff, and how they should be brought onto a staff. And through that conversation, you can understand if you feel it's a right fit for your organization. We definitely work with organizations that have yet to hire, because we, at least myself, I enjoy the idea of an organization preparing rather than kind of hiring and trying to figure it out, because we want to lay that foundation and set up a structure where everyone can be successful. And there is a lot to understand about the youth peer advocate role in supporting and sustaining it. So we want to make sure that the organization has a great understanding of that prior to putting someone maybe in a situation where they can't succeed. So yeah, we can definitely connect prior to hiring and kind of lay the groundwork of what it looks like to hire, support, and sustain youth peer advocacy, and just have those discussions and kind of explain to you the role.
Great. There's a question, do all the requests for technical assistance have to go through the assessment process? What if I just have one or two quick questions?
Great. I like this question because some of my thoughts as we were creating this is like, I don't want people to think that everything is a huge process, because especially traditionally, a lot of our TA is kind of as we go. So if it's one or two questions, you don't have to go through an assessment process. I think a lot of these tools are, again, so that we can better support your organization and other organizations. So we're really keeping notes and making sure we're keeping track. So like this assessment process is almost on us to make sure we're almost remembering what we do, so we can offer those supports to other people, but also so we're tracking and making sure we're staying in contact with people. But for quick questions or like even reviewing of flyers, there doesn't have to be an assessment. It's kind of just through a conversation and understanding. So for quick TA or short-term TA, it looks different, and that's kind of just like us taking notes on what we've done and making sure we remember who we are in contact with, less so than filling out a full assessment form.
To piggyback off of that, if you need any help with anything, if you literally just want us to do one thing for you or just a quick question answer, all you have to do is get in touch with us. We're not going to say no. If you need that help, we are going to help you, and we're going to support you in any way that we can. We may try to help you more or support you more in various areas, but it's not necessary to do that.
And really our goal of that is to make sure that just like how we are in a stance of truly informing young people as a part of being youth guided, we're going to truly inform anyone who's requesting technical assistance, that transparency, that like, hey, like this is some stuff that when you're ready, you can do this too. And we're more than happy to be here when you're ready to do these things too, if you want to. And we'll advise around that. So I don't know if one thing that I don't know if we mentioned it yet, but pretty much all of our technical assistance is free. There's no cost to organizations that are requesting these things. And that is a huge bonus because sometimes when you're contracting with somebody, it can be a cost to an agency. And ultimately, this is something that, we're funded to support agencies because we believe in youth-guided practice and young people. And it's something we want to do to make sure that young people are getting the best that they can.
Great. So this is a question about that I think was sparked by Alex's example of working with a Prose program. For those of you on the phone now, the definition of a youth, crosses over the systems idea of, children being 18 or under 18 and adults being over 18. Are you guys able to work with, traditionally adult service providers like Prose who are serving young adults? That's a kind of provider that you are able to provide technical assistance to?
Yes. So our age range for the Youth Power program is 14 to 30, so youth and young adults. So, I've definitely had requests to go into Prose programs and hold focus groups and kind of build engagement of young people or understand what they want to see from that program. So that's definitely something that is well within the age range that we support and speak for.
Great. Thanks. I think that'll be helpful for people to know. Well, we've reached 12:30, and I really want to thank our panelists, not only for joining us for an hour today to help everybody understand what you have to offer, but for all the wonderful work that you're doing out there in the community. And I encourage everybody who's listening today to reach out to your regional youth partner, even if it's just for one of those small things that folks talked about today, to get their input and their youth perspective and their experience around doing some of these things that may be new for your agency. And so with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and I hope you have a pleasant afternoon.